YOLO, you know?
I don't think that means what you think it means in this circumstance.
Like dangerous FOMO. Like fear of missing out on a hell dimension.
It's like, I would never touch that thing. Oh, but it's right in front of me? Well, I feel like I have to.
Famous last words.
Hey, the spoopy season is upon us. Am I allowed to say spoopy, or are y'all anti-spoopy people?
I'm
Wait,
spoopy.
spoopy?
Yeah, that's
a
word. That's what people say it now is spoopy. I have no idea why,
Oh.
but that's kind of become the nomenclature.
Oh, you millennials.
I think, are we past millennials?
What will you come up with next?
Most millennials are retiring now, I think. I'm not
Shit,
sure.
God, I wish. If only.
Gen Xers are like, wait, are we still alive? But yeah, it's October, and so it's horror movie season. My favorite season of the year. And for the show, we're going to take a look at some of the stuff that's coming out shortly that qualifies as scary stuff that we're excited to see.
Well, you just got back from Fantastic Fest, where you've seen all the stuff that is possibly
Which is
coming
why
out.
I'm totally cheating on this episode, because mine's not going to be stuff I'm looking forward to seeing. Mine
It's
is
stuff
that's
seen.
coming out I've already seen that I
see.
can tell you is good.
Okay, all right. Well, I look forward to listening to you, because
Well,
I don't even know what's coming out.
Well, fair. So I guess then Danny here from Belle of Lost Souls is going to have to give us our first.
So this is the thing I'm second. Okay, so the thing I'm the most excited about, and like, you know, this is coming a mile away, but Dragula Titans. The Boulet brothers are they host a drag pageant or drag competition show. But it's actually like, it's your punk rock, your filthy, your horror, your horrible kind of drag performers. It's very queer friendly. So you've got drag performers of all genders and all body types. The first season is basically like on YouTube, and they scratched together the budget themselves. And then season 2 got a little bit more money. Season 3 is where the show really hits its stride. And then after season 3, it was picked up by Shudder. So they have, if you go to Shudder, they have seasons 2, 3, and 4 available.
How many episodes per season?
So it's usually like 10 to 12.
Okay.
So it's kind of the AEW wrestling of drag stuff, huh?
It's phenomenal. They talk about a lot of really cool issues. You get to see some of the best makeup work, some of the best performances. To me, it really does a great job of showing that, like, drag has always been really alternative, and I think there's a certain other drag competition show that makes it seem a lot more like pageanty and like kind of a Mean Girl type setting. And Dragula is just not like that. And I love the Boulet brothers. I love everything they do professionally. They just struck a deal with Shudder to produce, more content. I'm very excited. They just struck a deal with Shudder to produce more content, some scripted content, which is really cool because throughout the seasons they've been sort of building their own universe. And so, like, you know,
the Dragula extended cinematic.
Yes, yeah, it's great, and at the end of every episode, the person who's eliminated gets murdered. So they each get to act out this like scene of like being murdered by the Boulets. And it's also creepy and spooky. And Titans is the first season that they're doing where they take previous competitors and pit them against each other. And, you know, one of the things that's really great about this show is that you watch the show and then you become really attached to these performers who are incredibly talented and, you know, just have really cool personalities. And then you start following them out in the world and you see how many people leave the show and just like everything that they do becomes even better than it already was. Like it really challenges their abilities as creators. And so like some of the most talented and competitive people that they've had on the show are people who've returned after their season, you know, after kind of fizzling out really early in their first season and having this experience where the show pushes them. I am so attached to this show. I love it. And it's one of everybody has a show where you're like, why doesn't everyone who really loves me watch this show? Like, if you really love me, you would watch the show. And Dragula is mine. If you really loved me, you will watch the show.
You know, I like you a lot.
Well, you know what? Okay, I take that back. If you really love yourself, you'll watch Dragula.
Wow, what an endorsement like that.
Yeah, I've been hearing Shudder went all in on that show. Like okay, this is gonna be our thing. We're gonna do this, and it's been doing great for them.
And it's paying off. Shudder curates its stuff in such a thoughtful way because you can tell that it's run by a bunch of really fabulous queers.
Oh yeah,
and just like, you know, weirdos and outcasts and marginalized people, and you can see that when you look at all their like sort of documentaries and educational stuff. And you can really see that with the enthusiasm and the joy that they give to Dragula.
Right. Speaking of, and this is not one of the things I was picking because I don't know when it's coming out, but we got to see Living with Chucky, which is the documentary about the history of the Chucky movies.
Oh, not the TV series?
No, they actually barely touch on the TV series because I think they had just started production when they were wrapping the movie. Okay. But it goes through the whole history, and that is an incredibly queer-coded franchise all the way through it. I mean, even like there's one of them, I think the Seed of Chucky, where he and the other female doll have a child together, and the child transitions and during the length of the movie. Like,
does that happen in the movie?
That happens in the movie, yeah.
All horror, as a rule of thumb, is gayer than you think it is if you just pay attention. But yes, definitely Chucky.
Yeah, no, and they go a lot into just those sort of things. Like so many people in horror are like, horror is kind of the subgenre for queer people. You
don't bring Jennifer Tilly onto your cast and not be openly catering to the queer community. I'm just...
It's true. But speaking of that as well, one of the movies that you can see very shortly, October 7th on Hulu, is going to be the new reboot, but you could call it a requel because there's no reason it never sets it up where it couldn't have happened after the other films, or let's just say the two good ones.
Okay.
Because the other ones are...
Can you just tell us what you're talking about?
We're talking about Hellraiser.
Dang, if we were doing this show tomorrow, I could chime in on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, too bad because I
plan to watch it tonight.
I can spoil it for you now by saying
I want to watch it.
Well, don't do that. Don't spoil it for me now.
People die. I'm just saying.
There's some bondage.
There's no point in me even watching it.
Ruined.
I was more excited than anything because, I love the first two Hellraiser films. I just thought that no one knew what to do with it after that. It
did seem that way.
It got silly, like a lot of horror franchises did in the 80s and 90s. But this is somebody who really goes, okay, let's get back to the roots. Let's go back to what makes this scary, and also sort of reinvent and really weigh in hard on the BDSM and sexuality of all of these characters. And one of the best changes is, first off, Pinhead is now played by a woman. She was there, which was cool. Everybody got to talk to her and meet her. It was really nice. Yeah, she was really sweet.
Did anybody open the box?
They didn't have a box. I wish they had had like boxes as a prize or something.
How did they not have the box?
Yeah, the box is in the movie, but
I know,
it's different
but if you're doing an exhibit, you don't have the box.
Yeah,
you are just like flirting with danger. Why are you trying to introduce that kind of chaos into your life?
YOLO, you know.
I don't think that means what you think it means in this circumstance.
Like dangerous FOMO, like fear of missing out on a hell dimension.
It's like, I would never touch that thing. Oh, but it's right in front of me? Well, I feel like I have to.
Famous last words.
But now they've gone now by today's standards, the leather outfits look a little silly of the Hellraiser movies. They got to where this is kind of corny looking, and leather got overplayed in Hollywood after that, like with the Matrix and everything.
Yeah.
So instead they're like, well, wait a minute, the human body is also flesh that can be dried and stretched. So they kind of reinvented them all, where instead of leather, their bodies are, basically formed into peeled and shaped leather formations. And you're like, okay, that's really, really cool.
No, it is a thing when you think about at the time the movie came out, the black leather and the bondage was always like, ooh. And now it's like, okay, what else you got?
Well,
now you can stream live videos of Folsom Street Fair, just no big deal. It's not
they
that
gotta go
exciting.
straight to snuff films.
Yeah, they had to go harder, and they did in fact go harder. And I was like, okay, well, this is working now. Plus, the mythology is built upon significantly, especially once we get into the third act, and you've got a big, cool, crazy, rich guy mansion that's specifically designed to do shit with Hellraiser cubes. So it's got all these cool, little.
Always the rich guys.
Stuff, right? Well, you can't afford the Hellraiser cube otherwise, or I'm sorry, the La Marchand's box, technically.
La Marchand's.
Well, it's funny because people always call it the Lamet configuration, and it turns out that has been incorrect all along.
Okay.
Now they correct you on that. No, the Lamet configuration is actually something else, which I won't spoil for you. It's kind of like an ending stinger, what that actually means.
Okay.
But yeah, once it gets really going, it's delightful. It's not here's the first story again, but different. It's a whole different set of characters. Hellraiser's whole different situation. And I had a lot of fun with it. It's by the director of The Night House, which I genuinely thought was one of the best horror films of the last several years. And they bring a lot of style to it. I really recommend it. I think people are out there are going to overall enjoy it. There were a lot of new to Hellraiser people in our audience who were like, oh my God, I've got to go watch some Hellraiser movies. And everybody's like, let me talk to you about that. Let me be very clear about watching the Hellraiser.
Well, I see Hellraiser 4 is on Tubi. I could just watch that right now.
Oh, no.
Okay, this is a public service announcement. Horror people, when your new friends get into Hellraiser for the first time, it is your job to sit them down and be like, okay, this is the Hellraiser that you watch. This is the Hellraiser that you completely ignore, pretend like it didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Scott Derrickson, who did The Black Phone recently and did Sinister, actually directed one of them early in his career called Bloodlines, but it is, as they were actually saying in the Chucky documentary, you can tell when a horror franchise is floundering when it, A, chooses to go to horror comedy more, or B, goes into outer space. And that went into outer space.
It did?
Yeah.
Well, and also, like, at that point, you also see them sort of like putting very minimal effort and budget into these movies because they have to make a movie every once or so years to hold on to the license.
Oh, that's true.
And if you're worried about it not being as gory because it's on Hulu, don't worry about it.
I was sent the link to watch the new one by Disney. Yeah. So it had me wondering.
Well, they own Hulu. So.
No, I know. Yeah. But it did have me wondering, like, okay, how hardcore is this?
Hulu goes pretty hard every Halloween. They're like, they even call it Huluween. And they'll do a mix of like stuff that's more kid oriented and stuff that's really serious hardcore horror. So
Also, really quickly, Huluween this year is also a drag extravaganza, which features some more of my favorite drag performers. So I'm just throwing it out there. I'm also excited about that. Okay, continuing on.
It's the only time I can say, you can be a real drag sometimes. And actually mean it as a compliment. Dad jokes. Reigning champion. I know.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
I actually got it. One of the big directors this year at the fest with a dad joke where he's laughing. He goes, "Wait a minute, that's a dad joke." I'm like, "You were laughing." He's like, "All right, point."
Those are the best ones. the ones that have a time release.
Yeah, exactly. Where it takes them a second.
Yeah, so it's like, wait a minute. Those are the best ones.
Yeah,
that's when you won.
Now you told me, I know you saw one that's about to come out anyway. That you
I didn't know if it was out this weekend or not.
Yeah, I can't remember,
because we already reviewed it. But it's the movie Smile, and it is a movie that I was looking forward to. And I very much try to avoid trailers and all whatever promotional items. And I saw there were news items how they hired people to go to different events, like the famous one at a baseball game, where a woman sat there going like.
Yeah.
Doing the smile to the point where somebody in security said, "Hey, could you sit down and stop doing that?"
I did see a picture of that and I was like, what the fuck?
Well, she's right behind the catcher. So the pitcher is seeing her the whole time he's throwing the ball. And she was standing up doing this.
That evil grin.
Evil grin. But yeah, and they've done a big promotional thing going on, having people like have these cardboard smiles they put up or take pictures of yourself. And you watch the movie, it's like, this is not that kind of movie.
Yeah.
This is not that kind of schlocky, hey, everybody get in on the fun. I don't want to say too much about it because I went in mostly cold, as cold as I could be. This movie is so much more about the plight of mental illness than it is about anything else.
Well, the main character is Kevin Bacon's daughter, Sosie Bacon.
Sosie Bacon, who works as she's a young psychiatrist who works with mentally ill patients. When somebody comes in who's telling her, "I'm having visions of people who are plaguing me and telling me and smiling
but not in a nice way.
Not in a nice way." She's like, "It's the most horrible smile you get." And she's trying to talk to her, and the girl suddenly in front of her does the smile and kills herself. And it's similar to Japanese horror, like the Grudge or The Ring, where once you see somebody do that, okay, now you've been marked.
Yeah, you're infected. I said It Follows.
Oh, yeah. It's very much
very much gave me vibes of a possession style.
Yes, well, we talked about that. It's another horror STD movie where you see that and it's like, okay.
Now you've got a countdown timer.
Well, tag, you're it.
Yeah.
And what do you do? And the fact that our main character has trauma in our history, mental illness in our history, and it's trying to convince the people around you that I'm seeing something. And they're like, yeah, I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what would you do?
No. It totally puts you in that. What would you do if you were her? What would you do if you were the people around her?
Yeah, no, you know me. I'd be the guy who'd immediately get infected next in whatever situation. I'd be like, it was because I opened this book. This book?
I love what the director does here. There's so many scenes of just flipping the screen over, the upside downness of it, the disorientation. And this is a movie where so often, if you watch the Oscars and something wins for sound design, a lot of times you're like, oh, okay, I guess. No, the sound design is a character in this movie. And as much as it's a slow burn, it's intense. I felt myself on the edge of my seat the entire time.
That's how I felt about the sound design in Midsommar. Like
Yes.
the sound design in that movie added a whole other level of terror. So if this is similar, like I think this movie is going to be one of my favorite horror movies for a variety of reasons.
I mean, honestly, I'm not a fan of horror movies, but I feel like this year has really stepped up with so many memorable horror movies that are.
There's just so many horrifying things out in the real world.
Well,
it's inspiration everywhere.
Like in the post Get Out, there's so many people who are coming to horror who are like, I'm not going to do just the cheap, schlocky movies like The Nun, where you watch and barely anything happens and you have to get excited because something moved in the background. Where it's, I don't know, are they calling it boutique horror? Is that the term?
I mean, that's a lot of people use a lot of different terms.
Yeah, a lot of different terms.
Plus, there's a lot of different types of horror now that are making up this whole new horror renaissance. You get your elevated horror, which is like
elevated,
Midsommar horror and what have you.
This is like all the distinctions between different kinds of heavy metal. Like at the end of the day, I'm like, I probably like almost all of them.
Yeah.
And I don't actually care which umbrella you fall under.
I guess like my falling off of liking horror movies because it seems like there's this knowledge that, well, horror fans are just happy with kills. We can make this as cheaply and as schlocky as we want. As long as we give them a few kills, they're super happy and we can collect our money.
Well, that was the 90s. That was pretty much the 90s. It was the era of post I Won't Know What You Did Last Summer, where they're all just, here's a bunch of teenagers. They're going to get killed one by one, but it'll still be PG-13, and they'll have a bunch of songs we can sell on the soundtrack.
Right, but the aughts brought in the paranormal activities, where it's the found footage and
I rewatched that the other day.
Nothing's really happening.
The aughts is the found footage era.
Yeah, nothing's really happening, and it carried over. Say you got The Conjuring, which is good, but then all the spinoffs were just like, okay, this is dull.
Well, the 2010s...
You're not doing anything.
2010s were where I felt like suddenly, even just horror directors and writers, suddenly had much more access to horror from around the world because we started getting streaming services. There started being more availability of like the boutique home video services making available stuff from like Malaysia and Spain. It's really good. And now we've got this whole new generation of directors that grew up going to festivals like Fantastic Fest and Fantasia and Beyond Fest, seeing this stuff from other countries and going, oh, I don't have to just kind of follow this formula.
Well, thanks to those streaming services, we also now have more data about what people are rewatching over and over again. So you get to see...
Her nuts fell on the floor?
My nuts fell on the floor.
Mine did earlier, but that's just because I'm nuts. I sat on mine.
But here's the thing where just, so many horror movies, especially this year, like I just even thinking back to The Black Phone, you get movies that they're almost as much thriller as they are horror.
Sure.
And, when you look at them more meat.
When you look at The Silence of the Lambs, for example, totally a horror movie. We absolutely see that as a horror movie, but at the time, nobody wanted to call it a horror movie because horror was really passé.
Right.
So they're like, it's a thriller, it's a this, and it's like,
Seven.
and it's also a horror movie.
Same with Seven.
Yeah.
People did the same thing where I'm like, come on, how could you not look at this as a horror movie?
But you can also look at the narrative and see kind of how they couched it a little bit more as a thriller.
No.
Because they didn't want to go for the
fits
horrors.
in between. Like most recently, Pearl. And Pearl is a work of art.
No, I loved it.
But it is one where you go, if somebody said like, well, isn't that a thriller? You have to stop and think about it. You can't just say no. You have to go like,
I had somebody say to me recently, and I was like, why didn't I think of that? It's like, honestly, the main difference between movies people get like really weird about and say, no, it's a thriller, not a horror, is if the main characters are not specifically the people being hunted. They're hunting the whatever is doing the killing. Right? So a lot of ones like Silence of the Lambs and Seven, where you're following the cops, the main character is not somebody who is like a potential victim. You know what I mean? And so that seems to be the dividing point for people. It doesn't matter what happens in the actual movie.
I think it's a little bit of
that, but I've also read another
Yeah.
dividing point is whether there's something supernatural involved.
Well, sure, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
but then like theoretically every first any slasher movie that doesn't have like that has a reasonable explanation for why the killer returns, then does that still not count?
Well,
like,
that's the thing. Every time somebody defines it, somebody can go like, well, what about this?
well, yeah, no, I mean, there's lots
because you could
of
start
ones.
with Halloween, where it's like, hey, this is a thriller. He's just somebody killing people. But then later you get to where he's invincible.
He's the shape.
Yeah, exactly.
Pure evil. Well, no, I mean, like, but nobody calls Halloween a thriller. It's always been horror, you know? And maybe that's partially because of the world in which it was created. Very indie, very low budget. It's not a big Hollywood film with big Hollywood people in it. Yeah. That seems to be a dividing point as well for people.
True.
Like, oh, I know everybody in this film, so it must be a thriller, because I wouldn't like something as cheesy as a horror film.
Yeah.
see, that's where I think it is. I think there's a classism type of vibe to it where like I don't like it because I used to be that way.
Yeah, it's
I
too
don't
good
like
to
horror.
be a horror film.
Horror is so like, I don't want to use the term lowbrow because that's fucked up, but like, it's just not. It's not fancy.
Is this offensive to people whose brows are low?
It's one of those catchphrases that we use now very normally, but it's actually based in eugenics.
Is it?
I just found this out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Lowbrow, highbrow is actually based in eugenics.
I had no idea. Well, we
Fun
don't want
fact, the
any
more
of-
you know.
We don't want any of that in here. So
Yeah.
let's move on. What was your next choice?
Oh God, my next choice. Okay, I'm trying to think of something else because, like, honestly, the Halloween drag extravaganza was like my big thing.
I can keep going.
Halloween. I mean, Halloween.
Yeah, this guy probably has 3 or 4.
Yeah, Halloween is gay Christmas, right? So, like,
It's Christmas.
Halloween is very commonly known as gay Christmas. So immediately my brain goes
I
into
never attached a gender to it, but I do prefer it to Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's like it's commonly known in the gay community because it's one of the few times of year that, like, back in the day when you had to be closeted and you had to perform your gender properly, it was one of the few days a year that you could kind of wiggle some of those rules and maybe wear something that you would get in trouble for wearing.
Sure.
At other points in the year.
Okay.
So historically,
I
it's
never
gay
thought of it
Christmas.
as a gender thing because it's always a time for good girls to slut it up.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh.
Which one could
so
say
yes.
as well. Like, you're also going like, there's part of them goes, I kind of wish I could dress like this more because I feel so sexy and everybody's looking at me.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that inherently. But it's the one time a year no one judges them for it.
Yeah.
You know? You're like, okay. Same with me. Like, I was like, well, I tried going to school in like August as Batman and everybody threw rocks at me. So
I wear my Batman onesie all year round because I've thrown a rock at me, but
Yeah, you got to wear it underneath your clothes. Because what if the sirens go?
I had my underoos, so always.
well, maybe it's because you were walking around in your underoos.
And clothes on top of them. Clothes on top of
okay.
them. I would have just to show off my cool ass underoos. My cool ass.
Okay, so tell me what else you're excited about.
Well, there's another film that's surprisingly, despite the fact it's somewhat high profile, is not getting a lot of press, advanced media, and that is the newest Kevin Williamson film called Sick. Now, Kevin Williamson, say what you will about the rest of his movies, which for my money aren't very good, but every
the
time
rest
it's
of
a
his
Kevin,
movies?
like it's Teaching Mrs. Tingle.
Oh, you just touched on a part of my preteen life that I didn't
just
remember.
Tingled.
You just tingled my teach or whatever.
Again,
I don't know.
I know what you did last summer. A lot of like those. He's the guy kind of responsible for the whole teens getting killed, but more high profile, like
Did
where
he do
Hollywood
Dawson's
grabbed
Creek?
it.
Was that what that is?
I think it was maybe his starting point, but Scream was his big break.
Yeah.
He wrote
No,
that.
rewatched Scream recently. It's a brilliant movie.
It's still a great movie, and it
So
changed everything.
Yeah.
Complete on multiple different levels. It changed everything. Some for the good, some for the bad, but it as a movie, you can't front on that. It's a great film. But so all these years later, it's like, oh, well, now they're marketing a big Kevin Williamson film. I'm like, here we go. But as it turns out, Sick is not what you'd expect from him, other than it does feature younger people in it. It is a tight, lean and mean slasher thriller with like, oh my God, who are the killers type thing that delivers, where it's first act, whole rest of it is just third act.
It's Skeet Ulrich.
You know, it's just like the killers are here and now everybody's just running and then getting killed and just nonstop, no breaks. And I was like,
as the kids say these days, say less. 'Cause I'm there.
it's really good. interesting because like a lot of movies like this, you're like, well, the killer is masked, so we're supposed to figure out who it might be. Except there's so few characters introduced. It's not anybody because we haven't seen anybody else really. Ooh. So you're like, all right. So they're kind of familiar tonally to the concept of the film rather than being a person you recognize, because the film is set in the middle of COVID lockdown. And it's these two girls going out to stay out at the dad's like expensive log cabin, the billionaire log cabin type thing, at a lake house. And and somebody starts coming in trying to kill them. And you're like, you go through that mental gymnastics through the thing until you finally, when it's revealed, you go, I see what you did there. And that was kind of cool. Okay. All right. It was really one of those, had the audience till the very end. You're very tense. And it's so well shot that they, even like the points where they're doing the fake scare, they don't go the duh, like they always do the loud sting. This just does a very low boom, which I was like, I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Cool.
So it's a very, in that first act, it's a very slow build of tension. But once it gets going, which like I said, is like right at the top of where the second act would be, it's just like non-stop through the rest of the film. All right. With some solid kills. Like brutal.
Here we go.
That kill count up.
Also want to throw out there, and I know I never ever thought I would say this, but Terrifier 2 is exactly the type of movie you were describing where it's like, people just go to see the gory kills. There's no plot to Terrifier 2. It's people getting killed by a now back from the dead evil clown that never speaks. But the guy who plays him is like this great mime. He's so funny, right? Like he's able to communicate so much just with his fingers and his facial expressions. And the kills are the goriest things you have ever seen in your entire life. Wow. Just so, and they're tons of them.
I've seen a lot.
But it sounds like it's the type of stuff I would eat chicken nuggets too.
Exactly. Or spaghetti,
Yeah.
You're like,
I have this weird thing where I'm like, ooh, it's gross. I really want a saucy food right now. Why do I want sauce?
Unfortunately, the best horror movie coming out in the next couple months isn't out till November, and that is The Menu, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Ralph Fiennes. And you've probably seen trailers for it already. It looks, people are already referring to it as the next elevated horror. It's not. It's a very snarky black horror comedy. And it is a riot with a bunch of rich one-percenters who are going out to this exclusive island for an exclusive dinner by an exclusive chef with his team. And it's like a very big deal. It's very expensive.
It's like White Lotus, the horror movie.
Very early in the film, they're like, yeah, we're going to kill you all. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's nowhere you can go. There are no boats off the island. There's nowhere you can run. But why don't you at least enjoy this amazing dinner we're preparing for you course by course. And each course is like designed to like fuck with who they are and like, tear them down emotionally. And it's...
Oh, wait, what?
I'm like trying to think of a dish that would tear me down emotionally.
Well, no, just like because he comes out for each dish and describes...
I'm so used to food building me up emotionally.
Describing what it is and what the inspiration was behind the dish. And each one is sort of ties into something that's been happening in the lives that makes each person a really bad person.
Okay, you got me.
But the gimme is that Anya Taylor-Joy was a fill-in date. She was not the person who was actually supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. She's actually a sex worker who's like, relatively poor. And so when Ray finds the chef who's mastermind all this finds out, he's like, this isn't working now. And he's got the whole movie centers around just the beating heart of it is the two of them. Every scene they have together is just on fire. Like they're just so good together on screen. Watching this whole level of communication about something you've never seen anyone communicate about before. I think anybody who's watching The Bear right now is going to be totally in the mood for this.
I was going to say this sounds really interesting to me too, because I'm very interested in how we treat sex workers specifically in these sorts of narratives, because in so many years past, sex workers have just been like easy cannon fodder. And now we're sort of getting to this point where we're like, oh no, they're actually people. And the way that we treat them in narratives is really important. And so the idea of Anya Taylor-Joy playing this like sex worker who ends up in this situation is very interesting to me, and I want to know.
Highly recommended. It was one of the audience favorites at the festival. We all went out of it like going, it's one of those weird films that as dark as it is, you come out completely just electric. You're like, that was so fun. I just want to start it over and watch it again.
That movie, and I'm blanking on the name of it because it had a simple name. It had Hilary Swank and Betty Gilpin.
I don't know.
No.
Karate Kid 2.
No. You do
4,
know,
I think, right?
because it was
That's
one
true.
where the liberals led all the conservatives out to some place to kill them off one by
Wasn't
one.
it like The Hunt? Or
That's a hunt.
Yeah.
That was
Oh.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
This is more, I don't know. It's like for instance, whenever they do the new course, they'll show the course on screen like on a television show. And sure enough, all those scenes are filmed by the guy who runs Chef's Table, the reality show, which is sort of the highest profile of cooking shows. So they're just these gorgeous meals, and they'll have the description of what they are. And as it goes along and it gets more and more brutal and more specific, it'll start listing stuff like, Tom's hidden jealousies and stuff.
And Mads Mikkelsen is not one of the sous chefs.
He is not.
Oh.
You got Ray Fiennes. What do you need Mads Mikkelsen there for?
I don't know.
They just like look at each other and just.
The two of them can't be in the same place at the same time,
Yeah.
otherwise the universe will collapse.
It would just explode. Yeah.
Hannibal, I do not need you stealing my recipes.
Anyway, I hope there was some good recommendations.
Yeah,
There's
sounds like some great ones.
I hope there's some stuff in there y'all check out and like as much as either we're looking forward to or as much as I did or Martin did. I was not as big on Smile, but you know what?
To each their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, we could have gone this whole show without you throwing that.
I know. I couldn't help
But
it.
we weren't gonna.
Anyway,
Smile is awesome. Go see it.
Please leave your comments on the YouTube page. Please like and subscribe. Also, we're available as a podcast now, so you can just listen to us blather on about whatever the topic is this particular week. You can check out Martin Thomas at doubletoasted.com.
As a matter of fact, we will be live in Las Vegas next weekend, October 8th.
I heard you guys say that when you were talking about how much you loved the Munsters.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, you didn't actually love the Munsters, did you?
No.
Okay, all right. Woo! I was like, see, the guy who loved the Munsters loves Smile. What does that tell you?